Okay, this is Jimmy Jive, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Today, my guest is a guitarist, vocalist that's been performing in the Detroit metropolitan area quite a few years. Started out with his first band, Rapunzel, played with Grinder, played in some version of Madam's X, and is most notably known for her guitar work and vocals in a band called Broadzilla. My guest today is Rachel May. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am very good. I'm glad to finally be able to talk to you. All right, let's start out with a little background. Tell me, like,
Sure.
where you grew up and kind of what got you into music.
Yeah, so born in Detroit, raised in Hamtramck, so I am a full-grown city girl. I was exposed to music at a young age. Dad was a musician. My uncle was a musician. In fact, he was signed to Motown back in the early days. So
Wow.
music has been a part of my family's history and the fabric of my youth. And getting into it as a teenager and getting exposed to hard rock and heavy metal, and that's really where I think I came alive as a musician and knew what I wanted to do as from a young age, from a teenager. But yeah, just exposed to it my entire life, so it was kind of hard to escape.
Right. When did you start playing guitar?
So I originally just started out as a singer. That's what my dad did. So I kind of learned from him. Same thing with my uncle. He was a singer. So I come from a family really of singers. But I noodled on the guitar as a teenager, but felt it a little challenging and intimidating at the time. Because it's a male-dominated industry, of course. So when I was a young teen, I'd go into the music stores and stuff, but I was too scared to take lessons.
Oh.
And so yeah, I'd hang around in those stores and look at all the guitars, and I was fascinated by it all, but I guess I just wasn't ready yet. And so so I started out just as a singer in my first couple bands, and then as started to really tap into songwriting, that's where I found it really frustrating because I had things in my head that I couldn't explain to another musician, another guitar player.
Right.
So I just picked it up and said, here, let me pluck a few notes out, and this is kind of what I'm thinking. And because I had some basic knowledge of guitar,
Mhm.
but it was really from there that I started to grind on the guitar a little bit harder, and to try to get some of these ideas out that were in my head. Broadzilla, when we started out, we were supposed to be a 4-piece band, so I was maybe going to play a little rhythm guitar, but I wasn't trying to be like the lead player or anything, because again, I was just sort of picking it up for songwriting.
Right.
But when we lost our second guitar player, kind of early on, we were kind of figuring it out, and musicians were coming and going out of Broadzilla until we really nailed it down to the three of us. But eventually, it just became a thing that we were going to be a 3-piece band, and I was going to have to figure it out. So,
Well, from the recordings I heard, you definitely figured it out. You're definitely
thank you. I
a very good
appreciate
player.
that. Yeah, I just I applied myself. I practiced. I listened to the bands that I liked and the players that I liked. Did what I could. I'm pretty much self-taught. I've never had
Mhm.
any formal lessons or anything, but I've had a lot of good friends that have sat down with me and showed me some of their tips and tricks, and
Right.
just kind of honed it into my own thing.
So who would you consider some of your earliest influences, whether it be on the guitar or bands in general, that kind of help mold your style?
Yeah, so I guess I would say, obviously I grew up around a lot of Motown, right?
Mhm.
Soul music and stuff like that. That was always big in my house. But as a teenager, like I was saying earlier, when I really kind of figured out what I wanted to do, it was really my exposure to MTV and the metal bands. I
Right.
got into the new wave of British heavy metal, so I was into like Priest and Maiden and stuff like that.
Right.
And then, I kind of got into early Motley Crue, early Metallica,
Right.
Slayer. At that time we were on the quest to like how heavy can it really be, finding Slayer and whatever it was, 84, 85, somewhere around there, finding bands like that, and then getting into the whole Bay Area thrash, so like Death and Testament and stuff like that. So
Right.
I got into a lot of the heavy metal, new wave heavy metal, Bay Area thrash, kind of the harder rock. I wasn't really too big into the hair metal, but I was definitely into the harder rock stuff. Motley Crue, I guess I could say those first couple albums kind
Right.
of were pretty influential. And Kiss, of course, the whole
Right.
larger than life
Of course.
persona, the makeup, the theatrics, all that stuff was real fascinating to me. But all through it all, I've always maintained very kind of wide range of influences, because I still cite to this day, some folks like Aretha, Gladys Knight as some of my favorite female singers of all time.
Oh,
So
definitely.
yeah, so I've kind of taken taking cues from there. I loved Prince in the '80s.
Mm-hmm.
I still love him. Again, what a magical songwriter.
Oh yeah.
And he offered a lot to music in general. So just kind of picking up on tip from that Columbia House record tape saved my life.
You're dating yourself now.
I am dating myself, but I mean that's what it was. That's how I got exposed to all the music that I did. Saving my allowance, go to the record store and buy records, and all that stuff was fascinating as a kid. To sit and open up a record and just look at it, read all the credits. And
so the bands that you were in before Broadzilla, like you mentioned, Rapunzel, I believe that was your first band. Were you just singing in those bands?
I was, yeah. I auditioned just as a singer for those bands, and that was kind of my first. Rapunzel was pretty much the first band I ever played out live with. I had noodled with a couple other bands before that. Yeah, when I played my first show at Blondie's. I think it was 1991, 1990, somewhere around there. I was in Rapunzel at the time, just a singer. That band kind of fell into some of those members. When that band kind of split, a couple of the members from Rapunzel formed a band called Beggars Opera.
Yeah.
And we were around for a while. And then Broadzilla kind of spun out of Beggars Opera. So actually, Angie, my drummer in Broadzilla, she was in Rapunzel with me. She was in Beggars Opera with me. And now she's in Broadzilla with me. So we've kind of been the two that have hung tight all those.
As far as songwriting, were you doing any original material in those early bands like Rapunzel and Beggars Opera?
Yes, we were. In Rapunzel, that band was mostly led by Taryn. Taryn has since passed away, but she was a phenomenal bass player, and she had written a few songs. So that band was like a mix of her original material, and then we played a bunch of metal covers. Mm-hmm. And so then, and same thing. When we got into Beggars Opera, that's when I was first starting to hone my skills as a songwriter, mm-hmm. and starting to because the band needed material, so I was trying to put together the things that I had written down or in my head or whatever. And so that's when I really started noodling around on guitar, but I still never played guitar in that band. And then when I finally figured out that I could play guitar and sing, that's when I decided, well, now I'm going to put my own band together, and it's going to be Broadzilla. And then I asked Angie if she wanted to come along for the ride, and she did. And so we kind of just took it from there. So really, I got off the ground and learned how to be a guitar player by being in Broadzilla.
Right. Now, Broadzilla, I'm going to ask you, because what I've heard of it, some people have said it was more of a female punk band, but from what you're saying, you're more into metal. Would you consider Broadzilla more of a metal type band or a punk metal, or how would you describe it?
I think as Broadzilla said today, we're a hard rock metal band, right? But the thing is when we first started Broadzilla, the bass player that I originally had in the band, she came a lot from the punk. So in our early days, we did share a lot of bills, punk bands. So we were playing with like SBLC and PBE and all, the ALD, all the acronym bands apparently.
Right.
And, so we were out there kind of hustling it on the punk rock scene, but that was mostly because of her influence. Her name is Michelle, and she now lives in Texas. She's got a couple bands going down there, but she kind of came from that scene, and so we were kind of flirting with that. And again, when we first started, I didn't have the songwriting skills, so we were writing basic 3-chord punk rock songs, right? At the very basic level. And then it was only as I started to grow as guitar player and grow as songwriter that those old metal influences started creeping their way back into what who I was learning from and how my songwriting was shaping into. And so ultimately, I think we've kind of become, we're not technically a metal band, but I think we're kind of like a hard rock teetering on the metal.
Yeah, I was going to say not necessarily metal, definitely influences of punk, but more of a hard rock punk, not like the Clash, the Ramones, or anything like that, but very unique. And what made you really unique was your voice, of course, because most of the punk bands wouldn't have had somebody that had the range and the type of voice that you have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that was my strength, though. Like, I had been singing since I was young, so by the time I got to Broadzilla, I had kind of, figured out who I was singer. I hadn't quite figured out who I was guitar player just yet. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it all kind of, it grew, taking a lot of cues from local bands, too, right? Because I used to go out and see bands like Seduce and Halloween and the Trash Brats, and, those bands were, super influential on me. I would go see them all the time. And so, Trash Brats came from the more kind of glam punk side of things, but I was greatly influenced by that band. And so, and of course, Seduce, I mean, who isn't in this town? If you grew up liking music in this town and you weren't influenced by Seduce, something's wrong with you.
That's true, especially getting, especially from the 80s, because you had mentioned playing in some of your early bands in the 90s, that was almost like borderline for when grunge was starting. Did that have a big effect on you and your bands at that time in Detroit from the places you were playing?
I think it did that was when Beggar's Opera was around. And I think that was the problem with that band is we couldn't find an identity because grunge was happening, everything was shifting. And I think we were trying to be all things to all people and it wasn't working, right? And I think it was a confusing time for a lot of bands in that era. Nobody knew what to do. Like, well, things were changing so fast, grunge kind of coming into the circle, you know? And so when I finally, decided that I could play guitar and sing and I was going to do my own band, well, like I said, that's where I just kind of tapped back into what I've always known, which is hard rock and metal.
Right.
So, that's more of what shaped us. But yeah, I think it was a struggle a little bit at the time because I don't think the venues knew what to do. They went from booking, all these, kind of hair metal bands to all of a sudden now we gotta find grunge bands. And, so it was definitely a shift in culture, and it happened so fast that I think it kind of set everyone back.
Exactly. I mean, the Token Lounge changed over to Mosquito Club, and they were trying to book bands in there like that, and it was a whole mishmash at that time. And even for bigger bands like Halloween Seduce that were still drawing, the scene had changed so much that the bands that were coming out were really trying to change and adjust to that, which to me was kind of ironic, funny coming out of Detroit.
You're right. And even when that whole kind of when the Token Lounge was 24 Karat Club for a while, and they were catering more towards like swing bands and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge shift in the 90s. And again, I think everyone was sort of trying to find out what the next thing was, to get on board with. And
Sure.
I think a lot of bands were a little confused. I think a lot of bars were confused. And, I think by mid-90s, everyone had kind of figured it out. But that early stage, like 91, 92, 93, it was confusing how things were changing so fast and how to adjust on the fly like that.
Now, in Broadzilla, were you still playing pretty much the same club circuit? Or had you kind of expanded out to some of the bigger clubs like Harpo's, the Reds place like that?
No, Rapunzel played Harpo's a lot. Beggar's Opera played Harpo's. But by the time that Broadzilla had come around, Harpo's had kind of died with the grunge thing, right? They were only doing shows like as touring bands would come through. They weren't like, remember back in the day, the Ritz and Harpo's and all these bars, they'd be open all the time. I mean, they'd have bands every day,
7 days,
Lounge, all of them, right? Just to go. You didn't even sometimes know who was playing. You just knew somebody was playing, you know? But by that time, I think Harpo's had kind of slowed down to just events. They weren't a regular open night. We shifted, and then, we started to get a little bit more exposure and start to take off. It started to kind of notice us a little. So then, our profile started growing, and then that meant we started playing bigger and better places. And, we kind of just came up. We came up pretty fast from about, 99 through like 2012. We had a really good like 13, 14-year run somewhere in there where,
That's excellent.
Nonstop, was constantly going, things, opportunities coming our way, and, putting out albums and just kind of doing it like we always dreamed we should.
Now, you had mentioned earlier, like coming up in the business a little bit, being it's a male-oriented field, in hard rock, metal, or whatever. Were you ever up against that as far as, trying to get gigs? Did you have any issues with that?
I don't know that it held us back getting gigs, but it held us back early on from earning respect as fast as maybe our male counterparts would have. Right. So, especially if we were going into a place first time, they think, oh, here comes another all-girl band, this night's going to suck, and then, then we get up there and we throw it down and they'd be like, wow, when can we have you guys back? So we had to work a little harder, some people, I think,
Sure.
at just getting the respect, but I think eventually we did. And, and then even when we did start to get the respect, then some of the guys were, well, how come they're getting all the shows? And,
Yeah.
So, you take a little bit of shit there, and I don't know. I guess we just found a way to kind of rise above it. I mean,
Well,
it was like
cool.
I've always thought, like, let the music do the talking, let our show do the talking. Like, we don't need to go around town and talk smack and get online and argue with people. Like, they want to talk shit about us, okay, but when it comes down to it, you want to come to a Broadzilla show, we're going to throw it down. We're going to give it what we got and do what we do. And, you're either going to like it or you're not. And so we try not to get involved too much in all of that, even though sometimes I don't know, it just kind of came our way. But, I don't know. I just attribute it to the fact that, it's a male dominated industry. And I get that. I get it. Like we had to work harder to prove ourselves. So be it.
Now, were there certain bands that you guys like opened for or headlined with that were more regular than others? Were there certain favorites that you played with?
Well, I think over the years, there were certain local bands that, we would always like to do shows with. I mean, early on, we did a bunch of stuff with Speedball at the time, who was one of our favorites locally. And, I don't know, over the years, there's just like certain bands that were hot at the time. Die Grinder was another one. I don't know if you remember them, but we used to do a lot of shows with them. And so my friend Elvis, she's in the band Chapstick. I don't know if you remember them, but we did a lot of shows with them out in Ipsy. And so, we would partner up with like our friends' bands, the bands that we were real down with. 500 Feet of Pipe. I don't know if you remember them, but do a lot of shows with that band. And so, I mean, in that term, we definitely palled up with certain bands around town, made it easy, made it fun.
Yeah. Did you ever do any shows where all three of the bands were, all female? Like, let's say Broadzilla, Huntress, Inside Out, something like that.
Well, I would have loved that. I still want to see that happen someday.
Yeah.
But yes, we did shows with all female bands and a lot of, certain events. Sometimes there were like Girls Who Rock events and stuff like that. We'd always get asked to play those and we'd participate. We would bring some bands in. We had a band from Pennsylvania that we used to play with all the time. They were from Pittsburgh. They were called the Motorcycles and loved them. And so we'd bring them here with us and they'd bring us to Pittsburgh with them. And so, I mean, we always kind of embraced the spirit of playing with all female bands, although I shied away from it in Vault because I didn't want to be lumped into the category of that's all we were, was just another female band, right?
Sure.
I wanted to be able to hold our own with boys. And so we played with a lot of male bands just because they were some of my favorite bands. And let's face it, there weren't a lot of girl bands around here to play with.
No, there weren't.
So we were kind of one of the only ones. There were other bands kind of doing their own thing, female bands, but as far as like the hard rock metal went, we just never, I don't know, we didn't have any locally that we would play with all time.
Yeah, the only other one that would have been Huntress.
Huntress was great. And that's the thing, when Rapunzel first started, Trina from Huntress was in Rapunzel. We're all kind of like, it's a cesspool of like female musicians. We've all been in bands with each other over the years because, the amount of female musicians in town is so small that we've all somehow ended up in bands together. But Huntress was great. Inside Out was great. In fact, I played in Queen Bee for a while. Karen Neal, she's fabulous. So,
always loved Inside Out. My band did gigs with them back in the day.
Yeah, and those were kind of the bands that, when I was coming up, same thing. Like, I loved Huntress and I loved Inside Out. And so, it was exciting for me when I first met, Karen Neal and started playing in Queen Bee with her. I mean, that was like, at that time, it was cool to me because I was just learning to play guitar, but yet all of a sudden I was finding myself playing with all my idols. Right. Cool. I mean, there's a lot of female musicians to look up to in this city for sure that came before us.
So how much touring did you do outside of Michigan? You had mentioned Pennsylvania and all that. Did you do any like actual tours or just like one shots?
No, we did a lot of touring actually. In fact, we would consider, we always called ourselves weekend warriors, but which we would regularly do the Midwest circuit, right? The kind of shows that you can go do like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then come home, work for 4 days, and then go back out for 3. Right. Kind of our MO for many years. And then, that Midwest touring, regional touring, kind of grew into bigger things. And so we picked up some agents along the way that, would put us on bigger tours. So we've done a few, across the United States. And then that led tours over, in the UK. And so we've done like England and Scotland, Wales, and, we've toured over there. And then we ended up picking up with bigger bands, right? So we went on tour with like Skid Row and like Jackal took us out on the road. And so, we've had all these like offers along the way that as like I was saying earlier, things just started to pick up for us, started happening at a rapid pace. And, we were just sort of along for the ride, right? Just trying to keep up with everything. And so, when I look back at it now, it's kind of crazy how much we packed into all those years, but it felt like we were never home. We were always out and then still playing Detroit when we could and just Ohio a lot because it was right there. We stuck in Canada when it was easier to cross the border. Right. Got a little harder over the years, but we used to go and do Toronto all the time. And in fact, we started out when Michelle was in the band, when we had the more punk influence, we started out playing this this festival in Canada called Punk Fest at Spiderland Acres. It's legendary. You talk to some of the punks that have been around for years, they'll tell you about Spiderland Acres. So yeah, I mean, Broadzilla was kind of, even from the get-go in 96, 97, 98, we were already going to like Wisconsin and, Toronto and, just getting out there. It kind of started early on.
You said you hooked up with some agents. Was the band actually managed at that time, or were you guys doing a lot of your own management as far as gigs and stuff?
I would say overall, we have always kind of maintained our own independence in terms of like managing and booking and so on. But we did at a certain point pick up an agency out of California. They picked us up, however you want to look at it. But I got a phone call one time. We were on the road and I got a phone call, and I'll never forget it, talking to this guy out in California and telling me all these things he's going to do for my band. And I'm sitting there kind of rolling my eyes like, yeah, sure. It turned out, I mean, he was one of the best things that happened for us, as he believed in us, and he put us in a lot of places. He's the one responsible for getting us over to the UK. He negotiated a couple potential record deals for us. And so, yeah, we never ended up signing with the record label, only because the offers that were presented to us were just kind of weak in terms of, like, at that point we were doing so much on our own. Mm-hmm. We had our own publicity company that we had hired. We had our own distribution company over in the UK. So they were selling our records over there already, and we were making all the money.
Right.
And so the record label comes around, they're like, well, yeah, we want to sign you, but we want to lock you in for, I don't know, 6 to 10 years or something. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to give you any tour support. No, by the way, any of the records that you sell, we're going to get all the money for it. Doesn't sound like a good deal at all.
No.
As much as that, I guess, had been our dream from back then, because you remember back then, that was the dream, right?
Yeah, the prestige.
You get a record label. Yeah, you get a record deal. As much as that had been our dream, we were realizing that, like, technology was changing, times were changing, and that, like, maybe bands didn't need record deals anymore. Like, we had the internet and social media, and, well, not quite at that point, but we had, it was started. So we were able to people and connect on our own that, giving a record label all my money when we were doing good on our own was sort of like, I don't know if this sounds like a good idea, So we never ended up signing with anybody, but
do you remember who some of the labels were? Were they big name labels or?
Yes, one of them was SPV, which I think Skid Row and Motorhead are on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think they're based out of Germany. So we were in talk with them for a while. In fact, I was almost ready to go to Germany to have a meeting, and the plug got pulled kind of right in the middle of all the negotiation. But being advised by our guy out in California and like our entertainment attorney and stuff that, like, this isn't really good for you,
Right.
So we never ended up doing that. And then I don't know if you remember this, but back in '99, I think it was, Limp Bizkit came to town and they were doing their Napster sponsored tour.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and so it was this big free tour, and people were waiting in line for days to get the wristbands. There was 2 shows in Detroit. They were kicking it off here in Detroit, and they had all this media was in town because this was like a huge it was MTV kind of a thing. Rolling Stone, Spin Magazine, everybody was here. And Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst he had subsidiary of Interscope Records, right? So what he was doing was he was signing young bands to this subsidiary label, under the Interscope moniker. So Fred Durst somehow gets a hold of us, and he sends some people to the Magic Bag where we were playing that night to see us. They give him the report back. Oh yeah, these girls are great. You got. So anyways, Fred Durst asked us to open those shows at the theater. Awesome. Yeah, and so I get this call literally like the day before. Hey, do you guys want to open the show tomorrow? And you got to be here by like 2:00. Mm-hmm. Like less than 24 hours to prepare. But and again, like, we weren't really a good match for Limp Bizkit. It was a chance to play in front of sold out shows in our hometown.
Yeah, good opportunity.
It was, and we knew that he had this label, so Potential to Talk label, whatever. So at that show, a lot of things happened that night. He introduced me to Jimmy Iovine of Dope Records. We interviewed on MTV with the DJ's name was Brian McFadden, and we interviewed with Spin Magazine. We were in Rolling Stone, Spin. We were on MTV. We were on local Fox 2 News.
Wow.
I'm meeting Jimmy Iovine. We're opening 2 sold out shows in our hometown, and I'm like, I'm thinking, like, I can't believe all this happened,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, like, things happen really fast and really quick. But funny thing about all that is that we had all that hype. That day was amazing, and then they were starting their tour, right? Mm-hmm. So at the end of the night, Fred and Jimmy I say to me, the show was great. We love you guys. We're gonna be in touch. The tour's just starting for us. We'll connect when the tour is over, and we'll proceed from there. Let me tell you, that that's the last I ever heard from him.
Oh, jeez.
Never heard another word. We just kept going on with our business, and that was that. But that's the music business, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
there's all those, so close moments, or those, just super sweet moments. Like, that was really a pivot point for Broadzilla because, again, like I said before, people, if you didn't know who we were before, people knew then because it blew up kind of overnight in our own hometown. And that's where a lot of people were like, how'd they get that show?
Were there any other local bands on that bill with them, or did they bring any other national acts along?
It was Cypress Hill was their opening act, and then they were supposed to have a band that was like a Metallica tribute. I think they were called Alcoholica, and they were from Canada,
Okay.
if I remember correct. And they had border issues, and so I don't think the intent was really that trying to get a local band on the show. I think he was just looking to sign local bands, right? That was his mission, was to get out, find local bands for his label. But when Alcoholica couldn't make it over the border, whatever the issue was, suddenly there became this, golden opportunity, and we just happened to be kind of at the right place at the right time. Which, again, that's the music business, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you got to be like struck by light, get anywhere in in this industry. So that was sort of our struck by lightning moment, where we just happened to be the band that was fresh in his mind, and he thought, well, let that girl soap. And so,
like you said, he sent people to see you. Had he heard of you himself before then, or had somebody else kind of turned him on to you to even have somebody check you out?
Okay, so this is another moment where we just happened to have somebody that had the connection, right? So we have what we've always called our unofficial fourth member, and that's been this guy, Jay Gray. He has been our right-hand man. He has been on every show. He toured with us on the UK with us. He's been our guy, right? He takes care of stage. He, just kind of looks out for us girls. Like, he has been the guy that's been with us the whole time. So anyways, Jason he did at the time, he was a stagehand at State Theater, which is now the Fillmore. He was there doing stagehand work. And so when the conversation was heard that Fred's looking for local bands, Jay Gray's like, well, I got a band for check out Broadzilla. And he gives him our CD. So Fred listens to the CD. He likes what he hears on CD. And then Jason said, hey, we got a show at the Magic Bag on Saturday, And so Fred said, well, I'm going to send some of my crew out, check you out. And actually, to this day, one of the guys that came to see us play that night, I'm still really good friends with.
Wow.
We've maintained a friendship the whole time. And he was the drum tech for Limp Bizkit, and he went on tech with Taylor Hawkins for a lot of years, all through the Foo Fighters. He was Taylor Hawkins, and he's been one of my greatest friends for a long time. His name's Yeti. Real name's Chad Ward, but Yeti was my good buddy. So anyway, came there that night with a couple other of the guys on the crew, and they're the ones that kind of lit the fire under Fred about us, and that's how we got the gig. Really a good match for Limp Bizkit, but hey, he takes nothing and does what he can. We were on our own trajectory, and I just thought, like, we're gonna keep going the way we're going, and we still, we progressed a lot from that point. That was really a pivot point for us. So for what I took out of it, what was great about it, right? It launched us, or it helped launch us, I say. It helped people take notice of us. Like, there were a lot of good moments to be had from it. It wasn't a total failure.
No, you were on MTV, you had those interviews. No, it had to all be actually very positive. All right, let's talk about your albums. How many CDs I imagine, they would have been CDs. You guys wouldn't have been in the vinyl. How many CDs did Broadzilla put out? So
we technically have a full album and an EP, but we probably have another album's worth of material that we've just never recorded. So that we've been playing live for a long time, But we got so hung up on promoting the second album, because that's really when things took off for us, that we were out so much and doing stuff and trying to support that album, that it held us back getting into the studio to do the third album. And so what ended up happening, we put out an EP. Really was supposed to be just some demos that we had recorded, but we just thought, well, might as well let's just throw them out there. And we labeled the EP, it's called Demon, because it has demo in it, right?
Right, okay.
So it was kind of a play on the fact that these were just demos, but hey, here's 4 new songs that, haven't been recorded yet. So yeah, and we still, to this day, talk about doing that third album, and it may happen one day, you never know.
As for that album and all that, or albums, I should say, where did you record them? Were they recorded locally here, there, or did you go to New York or someplace? Because being on the road as much as you were, it might have been a hindrance.
Yeah, I would. I guess I would have loved to have done something like that, but no, we chose to work with Andy Padlin at the Loft, and that was over in Saline, Michigan,
Yes.
which I think they're responsible for doing. I think they got kind of famous for doing the Sponge album.
Yep.
Initially. In fact, Andy's in Sponge now. So yeah, back in what was it, the late '90s, Andy and Tim Padden were the ones to go to, and they, as far as I was concerned, they had put out some really great sounding, local music too. There's a lot of local bands that put albums out through them, and so yeah, we worked with them on the first album, and we love the environment. I love just the I don't know if you know, but they've got a studio out on a farm, and so just it's a really good environment that's conducive to like that creativity, right? And so I just really felt relaxed there and comfortable, and Andy and Tim were really great to work with. We mostly worked with Andy. So yeah, we did the second album there. The demos one we had done with Mikey Clark, who did a lot of stuff with like ICP, and those demos, again, they were just demos. They weren't really like, fine. They weren't mixed or mastered or anything like. But I don't think we captured the same sound that we did with Andy. I think he understood us a little bit better as a rock band, and he captured a more full sound for us. So I think if we were to go and do a third album, I'd probably reach out to Andy again and see if he wanted to work with us.
Now, I always ask this because, most of the bands that I've interviewed or artists have either gone, to his studio there or to the Temperament. How long approximately did it take you guys per album to record them and then have them mastered? I'm always curious.
Yeah, I would say, just to record it, probably a good couple days to get, all the bed tracks down, and then maybe going back a week later or something and doing any kind of, layering of, harmonies or extra guitar or something like that, So I guess altogether, you might say a good 3 days, 4 days if you're adding all the time up, we go back sometimes for just a couple hours one night thing here.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because there'll be bands out there, national acts, that it can take years to do one album or month.
That's because they have the money.
Yeah, isn't that crazy though? Because I'll put your stuff up against any other band at any level as far as that, and to be able to go into a studio, any studio for that matter, and lay that stuff down that quickly. I understand it's a financial burden and all that. You're not Aerosmith or something at that level, but still, a lot of that's amazing because you really have to stay focused.
You do. You have to go in prepared. That's half the battle, right? Is knowing those songs inside and out and going in paired, and then again, you're on a budget. You don't have time to mess around, so you got to get in there and at least get the drums and bass and main guitar down, and those first 2 days, right? Those are like your long days. You might book 6-8 hours in a day, and just put it in for those couple of days, get it all down, and then like I said, you might go back a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and then go in for a mixing session. But usually the mixing, like Andy, he would kind of have it already mixed by the time we came in, and we just say maybe put some guitar up here,
especially by the second album, because he'd know what to do.
He did, yeah. He was really great to work with. He really understood us and where we were going. And he's another one, like all of his bands. I don't know if you remember, he was in Throttle Body at the time, and we would play with Throttle Body a lot. But again, it's like just your friends, and and that's what music's about. It's just getting together with your friends' bands and grinding it out.
And of course, it wasn't work to you anyway. Enjoyed it so much, so that's a bonus.
Yeah, a total passion project for sure.
All right, one of the last questions I wanted to ask you, and I kind of get in my mind an idea of what your answer will be. One of the songs you did, and having said that you had been brought up with a lot of Motown influences and R&B, was Love Child. I thought that was a really interesting song to do, as that kind of, that way as a metal or hard rock version. Did that song come to mind to record because of your background? If somebody suggested, or had you been playing it live? How did that come about?
It did. It has a little bit to do with the background, right? Because I did listen to a lot of that music growing up. Diana Ross, Aretha, and Gladys Knight. Those are, three. Shaka Khan, Tina Turner. I loved all of those old soul female voices.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess there was just a day that I was listening to that song, and I heard something in my head that was just, I was like, wow, this might be kind of cool in a rocked up version. That's part of it. And now the other part part is that there was a band here in Detroit, kind of like, I guess you kind of call them an all-star band. It's a bunch of guys from other bands that had kind of got together, and that was their whole gimmick, was that they did Motown songs, but in a rock band format, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had a couple backup singers, and I was fascinated by this band. They never took off that much. I mean, they had kind of a moment, but they were only around, I feel like, for a couple years, and then they were done. You know, the guys were on to other projects and all that.
Do you remember the name?
They were called Hot Rod from Hell, or Hot Rods to Hell, Hot Rods from Hell, something like that.
That's an interesting name for a Motown type of thing.
Yeah, it was, I'm trying to think of the singer's name. Oh, he was in Ezra. I can't think of his name right now, but he was the singer in Ezra, and then it was like John Guy on bass, who had been in Romeo Rock back in the day. I don't know if you remember that band.
Yeah, John Avedition.
Yep, John Avedition was the bass player. Donnie,
Scarcella?
Yeah, he was the guitar player. Tom, was singer Tommy.
Tommy Ingram?
Tommy Ingram, yeah.
All
Tommy
members
Ingram.
of Romeo Rock.
Right. So they had all done, this Hot Rods to Hell band, and they had a couple backup singers. I forget who the drummer was. I can't quite recall. And I was young at this time. I don't think I really had a band yet, or I was just starting out in local bands. I was part of the scene for sure. I was always going out seeing other bands, but I hadn't quite had my band together yet.
Right.
And so they were one that I saw early on that was doing that concept. And so me coming from a Motown background like that and seeing a rock band do it was super inspiring. I was like, wow, that's a cool thing. And so my idea of doing cover songs, I never wanted to do you're Broadzilla, you should do a Runaways song,
right,
or you should do a Ramones song, or I never wanted to be that kind of generic about it.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be a little bit more creative with it. And so that one day, kind of with that in the back of my mind, that one day I was listening to Diana Ross and Love Child came on, and I just, I heard it in a more rocked up version and took it to the band, and what do you guys think about this? And they were on board, and it became we became the band that was doing Love Child.
That's because it's such a great version. I mean, and it fits in quite well with the rest of the album. I mean, it's right there, but I'm like, at first when I'm looking at it, I'm like going, is that what I think it is? And I was telling her, like, that's really, really cool. I love it when you can do stuff like that. And you've got the chops to sing that. Did everybody else in the band, did they sing backup on it, or were you doing it all?
Probably in the studio. I did a lot. I know that Angie takes a lot of the vocals most often in the live world.
Mm-hmm.
She may have sung on that. I can't remember. It's been a long time since we recorded that album, but she may have sung on that in the studio. She probably did, I would assume, because we definitely had some kind of chant vocals going on in that. Kim may even have also sung on that in the studio, and and live Kim sings as well. But I think Angie's the one that always kind of focuses in on the harmonies and stuff like that.
What are you up to lately? Are you still performing? What's up with your career right now?
Yeah, so I've got a couple bands going right now. I have an original, a heavy blues rock band. It's called the Detroit Fury, and doing that with a good group of friends of mine. You might know the bass player, Mike B. He's in the Reeferman. He was in Faith. Yeah, so Mike B's in the band. A guitar player that I've worked with a lot over the years in blues projects, Big Al. He's known around here in the blues scene. He's a phenomenal player. Him and I have been in bands off and on through the years, and so, this is kind of like our project that we started together with the Detroit Fury. And so it's kind of, we call it dirty, gritty, bluesy Detroit rock and roll.
Cool.
So
are you playing guitar in this? Or just
Yeah, I'm playing guitar and singing. And we've got a couple songs that we recorded last summer. So those are up on our website, DetroitFury.com, if I'm doing my job correctly. And then I also am playing in a cover band, doing kind of one gig a month, just doing, 3 sets a night, just singing kind of 80s and, classic rock kind of stuff.
So I know you're doing those two things, and you had mentioned earlier that you had that Radzilla album that was never finished or recorded or whatever. Are there any chances of any kind of a Broadzilla reunion show of any kind? Is there been any thought of that, or any hope for that?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot, where it's, it's always like trying to find the right time, the right place, and then, I always overthink it. I'm like, if we're going to play, we have to have new product, and we should put some new music out, like we should make a big deal about it if we're going to play, and do it up big, and then, time goes by, and we're all involved in other never had. But like I've always said, the band has never really officially broken up. We just sort of have, when we got older, we're living our lives, we're doing our thing, and it just didn't become viable to do Broadzilla at the pace that we were doing it for so so many years,
Sure.
you know? And so I think we all kind of enjoy the music that we're doing now and just sort of the pace that we're at. But we always talk about it. I'm still friends with Angie and Kim. There's still life left in the band. It's just a matter of, you know, dedicating the time and the money and finding the right band to play with. And, you know, 'cause you know, if you're going to do a show, it costs money to get it off the ground, right?
Sure.
So like we have to have the right investment to do it. We have to, you know, the stars have to align basically. But I feel like we're going to do it because we're coming up on 30 years as a band. And I think that's a pretty big deal and probably something to celebrate. So we talked about, you know, possibly doing something next year. So I don't know. I guess, you know, next time I talk to Angie and Kim, we might have to really hunker down on those plans.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would be into it because the music was phenomenal. Well, Rachel, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I really, really appreciate you doing this and helping me out with this interview. I wish you all the best. Hopefully, we can, you know, get that other Broadzilla album going and maybe a show down the line. Just a one shot, you know, get into Harpo's or something.
You never know.
I'm telling you, people will, if you show up, people will come. They will come.
I appreciate that, and I enjoyed our conversation today. And thanks for what you're doing. Some of the other interviews have been really great. You know, I know you did talk to Ricky Rat, right? Yep.
Yeah, we used to play with bands like that. My band. We were from the '80s. We played with the Trash Bags, Junk.
Yeah, and Robin too. I've known him from all his bands from all those years, and I know you interviewed. Well, you said Seduce, and you did Chuck too, right? Chuck Burns.
And their original drummer, make him sing clear.
Yeah, so I appreciate what you're doing too, just kind of keeping some of these stories alive and some of that music still alive. And it is cool. Detroit's got a lot of cool bands and cool, you know, stories that we all have shared over the years and how we've all played together and took cues from each other. And it's really cool to see you bringing it all together. So keep up the good work there.
Okay, Rachel. Well, again, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. And I wish you all the best of luck and stuff down the line with whatever, you know, musical thing you proceed with next.
Well, thank you so much. Same to you.
All right. Take care and have a good night.
All right. Peace.
Bye-bye. All right, this is Jimmy Jive, and that was Rachel May, singer-songwriter, guitarist, who really came into her own with Broadzilla and wrote some really cool stuff. You know, it's sort of punk, probably like she said, more towards the hard rock. You can hear elements of punk in it, but probably more towards hard rock. And not glam rock, like some of the chick bands that were playing, like Vixen and all that. This is like real in-your-face rock and roll. Really good stuff. Check them out on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, or whatever. You won't be disappointed. Anyway, this is Jimmy Jive, and you've been listening to Motor City Rock Talk. And if you can do me a favor, if you're digging these interviews, and I hope you are, and I've got some others coming down the line, hit the like button, leave me a comment, and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, and it really helps me out as far as encouraging me to get more artists, bigger artists, go forward with it a little bit more. Anyway, as I like to say, keep rocking.